just like that river I've been running ever since. It's been a long...
Hi, everyone. My name is Don McCord, and I'm a member of the Chicago Children's Choir Ambassadors Board. And I'm really excited to be here as part of the series of the Chicago Children's Choir Fireside Chat. And I'm really excited because I get to speak with Reverend Jonathan Brooks, or Pastah J, as we affectionately call him. He is a teacher, a speaker, a writer, an artist, a community activist. Pastah J is also a lifelong Chicagoan and serves as a senior pastor at Canaan Community Church in West Englewood. Pastah J has been teaching and working with youth and young adults for over 15 years, beginning his educational career as a youth pastor and an elementary teacher. He is currently a trainer, a coach, and a presenter for the Christian Community Development Association. Pastah J's ministry focuses on youth development, holistic health, college scholarships, art and music, as well as restorative justice practices and care for the incarcerated and their families. This through the efforts of Canaan's Church's nonprofit community development company. An avid writer, Pastah J has contributed to numerous blogs, articles, and books, and recently released the book, Church Forsaken, Practicing Presence in Neglected Neighborhoods. Pastah J is an alumni of the Chicago Children's Choir. He is an accomplished vocalist performing in a variety of genres around the world, including gospel, blues, jazz, Negro spirituals, hip hop, classical, and choral music. Pastah J and Canaan Community Church just released their debut gospel album in 2015 called Recommend Jesus. Pastah J has worked with notable hip hop artists and also has been featured on numerous hip hop albums. He's the leader in the hip hop worship community and has recorded 4 hip hop albums with the group Outworld and is currently working on his. You can certainly get an amen from me, Pastah J. Welcome and thank you for being a part of this series.
Thank you for having me, Don. That was a pretty lofty introduction. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. You know, I was going through your resume, and you have such an extensive educational background. You have a degree in architecture from Tuskegee. You have a master's of arts in teaching and in performing arts, and a master's in theology and community development. I'm just wondering, what has motivated you in all these pursuits, and how has that prepared you for now and the work that you do as senior pastor at Canaan Community Church in the West Englewood community?
Yeah, thanks, Don. Great question. It is an interesting portfolio, and I guess that's advice to everybody. You don't have to put all your pursuits into one area. If God's gifted you in many ways, use them all and become expert in as many as you can. But I think for me, what drove me was my attempts at making sure that my education could be applied to life. Like, I'm not a person who gains education for the sake of having letters after their name. I want to be able to apply the principles, the education, the things that I have in everyday practice. So I'm one of those people who are trying to pull scholarly activity out of their ivory tower and put it on the ground. So when I got my undergraduate degree in architecture, it was because I was interested in what architects were saying about things like gentrification and about changing neighborhood personification and how you rewrite narratives in neighborhoods that have been neglected for a long time. And so it was always about thinking about my neighborhood where I grew up and how I could apply what I was learning in architecture to not only design buildings and make money, but to influence other architects around me. As I got into education, I realized that I wanted young people to have the same experiences that I had growing up. The experiences like the Chicago Children's Choir afforded me to be excellent in music and artistry, and to think of myself more highly than my neighborhood thought I should have thought of myself. To have the experiences that other people around me weren't having. And so I went back and got my education degree, and because of my architecture degree, was able to get an emphasis in the arts. So visual arts, dance, music, and drama, and spent quite a few years doing that. And my goal of all of my programs was to give kids an excellent early experience with the arts. So that whether they wanted to become an artist when they grew up or not, they would always have their foundation be, I had a great music teacher. I had a great art teacher. He made it so fun. He made me love this thing. So that whether or not they become an artist in when they become an adult, they'll always have a love for the arts. And then when I got into seminary after becoming a pastor, it was a no-brainer for me to do Christian community development, because what Christian community development was doing was it was merging all of my passions: a passion for place where I was living in my neighborhood that I grew up in, a passion for speaking to people who are making decisions around planning and community development and architecture, all the things that I was passionate about initially. And then it gave me this other emphasis of what is God actually saying about all that stuff. As a believer in God, does God have something to say about excellence in arts? Does God have something to say about the way neighborhoods are arranged and shifted and maintained? Does God have something to say about the way the world is today? And ultimately, I have a big yes to that.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of the way the world is today, I mean, communities around the world right now are being disrupted at every level because of the current pandemic. What are you and Canaan Community Church doing to stay united and to stay positive and to support the larger community, specifically West Englewood?
Yeah. This is definitely an unprecedented time. And I've just determined that in moments like this is the time where you, as a leader, you cannot lead out of memory. You have to lead out of imagination. It's a time to start thinking about what can be, not what's always been. And so at Canaan, we're just trying new stuff, right? Like, we live streamed our services, usually just a sermon on Facebook Live, and now we're streaming the whole thing, right? Because we can't gather together. But beyond the streaming services, it's like, how do you stay connected with one another? Some people are like videoing their services and then broadcasting. Well, that's not how we want to roll, because we're about actually caring and seeing one another. So it's not about people seeing my face, it's about seeing one another. And so we use Zoom, and then we have these 100 people up on the screen, right? And during our times of worship and singing and all that, what I do is I spotlight each person's video so that we can see people singing and clapping and dancing and worshiping or whatever they're doing and engage with one another. And one of the things I thought would be the biggest burdens was I come from a Black preaching style, where I'm used to, amen, preacher, you better say that. But I was like, I'm going to lose that online. Man, the chat room has been on fire. You better preach, Pastor. You better say that. That's amazing. And the same endorphins you get from a like on Instagram, right? It's the same endorphins I get, endorphin surge I get from that. So we've done a lot of creative stuff. The week of Holy Week, we did an activity every day. We did a motivation and movement Monday where we had like a dance class together as a church on Zoom. On Tuesday, we did a testimony Tuesday where people just shared how they've seen God working in the community. On Wednesday, we did Worship Wednesday where we invited friends from all over the city to record worship songs, dances, different things. And then we all just watched it online. Thursday, we did theater. Thursday, I watched the Passion of the Christ. And then Friday, because we're celebrating 20 years as a church this year, we watched the very first service our church ever had. I wasn't even there. I was still in college. And we called that Flashback Friday. So we're having some creative stuff. It's been good. As far as connected with the whole community, we're doing our food distribution center every week. We are connecting with people who need rides. We are partnering with an organization called My Block, My Hood, My City, led by Jamal Cole. And we're checking in on 5 seniors every day. So I split up 150 seniors, spread it out amongst my congregation. And we're checking up and providing food for them and other resources and connecting them because he got a bombard of folks. So we're taking care of Englewood for him. So, hey, we're just trying to be the church where love makes a difference, brother.
That's amazing. And I hear you talk about the performances. Let's talk about your early days in the Chicago Children's Choir. In fact, one of the questions was, when did you start? But I'm wondering, as an alumni of the Chicago Children's Choir, when you were a kid and now as an accomplished vocal performer, you've sung on stages all around the world, which, and I'm looking at this list and it's pretty extensive: Mexico, Japan, Russia, Poland, South Africa, Austria, and Italy. Just to name a few. Has your time with CCC as a youth had any influence on your performances at all? And how has that brought, how has that experience, how's that helped you right now in your current role as senior pastor at Canaan Community Church?
Well, absolutely. The early days of CCD, I started at CCC in 1989 and went for 8 years to 1997. So those were amazing, formative years for me. All of my teen years and a little before that. just to be clear, some of those places on that list were with CCC, so I'm not going to take credit for all of those. But a few of them have been post CCC. And the reason why I think even as somebody who didn't necessarily study vocal performance or study music more formally in school, all of my early years with CCC gave me so much confidence. And that's a big thing to say to a kid who actually was ashamed to be in a choir when I first got put in there. But my mom forced me to be in choir to keep me off the streets and keep me out of trouble. But I so fell in love with this choir, and it gave me not only the confidence, but it gave me the concern for a global world. Right? Once you get a taste of traveling outside of the country, especially as a teenager, and seeing the world in a bigger way. And what God is doing all over the world, and the way people live, and the way music is a language that all of us speak, no matter what language we actually speak, it changes the way you live in your own place. So yeah, I would say the only reason I'm a hip hop artist, sing blues, have sung at Ravinia, sung downtown at Millennium Park, sung overseas, and I went back to South Africa in 2016 after going with choir in '96 to perform again, because choir gave me the confidence and the concern. So music for me is not just about performance and sounding good. Of course, you want to be excellent and sound well, but it is also about the emotions it evokes, the peace it can bring, the fact that it's a language that everyone can speak, and no matter where you go, you can bust out into a song, and someone who doesn't even speak the same language as you can join you. That's powerful, and it can change the whole essence of a space. And I'm thankful for my time in choir. I would not consider myself a performer if I had not been a part of the Chicago Children's Choir, but I do now.
Wow. So that's amazing. So you sing multiple styles of music, as you mentioned. Is there a particular genre that you feel most comfortable performing?
Yeah. So I'll have to answer that two ways. The one I sing the most is gospel, because I'm a Black pastor in a Black church. I'm probably most comfortable singing Negro spirituals and doing hip hop. Those are my two. Hip hop being my number one music style, because it's probably my number one cultural connection. I grew up in hip hop. I grew up with that being the voices that I listened to about what the world was saying and how I was supposed to live in it. But then when I went to Tuskegee in undergrad, coming straight out of Chicago Children's Choir, the first thing I did when I stepped on Tuskegee's campus was ask, where's the choir director and how do I get an audition? And it was at Tuskegee, the home of and founder Booker T. Washington, the work of George Washington Carver, all done there. Rosa Parks, born and raised there. The Tuskegee Airmen. There was so much African American history. And then William Dawson, the Dean of Negro Choral Composers, the first conductor of the Tuskegee Choir. I learned so much about African American choral music at Tuskegee, and Negro spirituals became my absolute favorite kind of music. One of the things that truly blessed me when I came back and heard choir, the children's choir, one of the first times I came back from college at Rockefeller Chapel, is they were singing Moses Hogan, Elijah Rock. And I just burst into tears, because that's the kind of music that I had fallen in love with going on to Tuskegee, and to hear the choir that I so love and got all my training from come back and singing it so well under the direction of Josephine. It just did my heart well. So those are my two, hip hop top, Negro spirituals right under, and then gospel, because I sing it all the time.
Right. And so before we jump into I see a lot of questions popping up. I wanted to ask you one more, because you talk about you write and perform hip hop worship music. What does hip hop bring to religious music and its community? And how do you envision hip hop worship expanding across church communities on a larger scale?
Yeah. Well, I think the number one thing that hip hop brings to religious music is a centering of the marginalized and oppressed. Hip hop is a culture that came out of oppression. It came out of young people not being able to express themselves artistically and having to find a way to do that. A lot of people don't know about the origins of how hip hop actually started with MCing, breakdance, and graffiti, and DJing. The DJs were creating their own instruments because there was no musical offerings happening in the public schools in New York at the time. And they're taking their parents' old 70s disco records and making new instruments and making their own sounds. Graffiti artists are beautifying abandoned and dilapidated buildings that have been burned down in their neighborhood. Breakdancers are stopping gangs from fighting and saying, if you have a disagreement, solve it on the dance floor. And rappers are taking the pain of the neighborhood and putting it out for the whole world to see, right? So hip hop can get religion back to its roots of caring for the poor and marginalized and those who have been neglected around our country and the world. I think the other part that it does is it reminds us of how global we are. The only real global community and culture there is right now, at least the biggest, is hip hop. I travel all over the world, and everywhere I go, hip hop is the constant. I was in the rural villages of the Maasai outside of Kenya, and spray painted on the rooftops was names of rappers, and in the barbershop they were playing Jay-Z, right? In a shanty home with no running water. You know, and so those are the type of things I recognize. Hip hop is global. And when we talk about being a global community, religion sometimes forgets that. And I think hip hop can bring us back to our core of recognizing, as the choir says, we all live here. And if we are going to live here, how do we live here in a way that shows that we care for one another? So I think it's going to spread because of its authenticity, of its attention to detail, its attention to lyrics and language, as well as its global impact.
Right. And now you're currently working on a project, Can I Get an
Yes,
Amen? I mentioned
yeah.
earlier. Can you tell us a little bit about that project and the process, how I got started? And
Yeah, so for me, it was all about trying to wake up the religious and the secular community to recognize that we need one another. My book was kind of trying to do the same thing. This whole premise of my question is, if I say this to a religious community, something like, you need hip hop to be a voice for you, can I get an amen over there, right? And then if I say this to a community that maybe is not religious and doesn't really deal with religion, if I say that religious is also about human flourishing and about seeing the world flourish as it should, so religion isn't all bad, can I get an amen over there, right? It's a way of trying to speak to both people of faith and people who are not people of faith and say, there's a place we can merge in the middle, and that's around human flourishing and the value of human life. So the process has been difficult because every piece of art that I make, I'm trying to make sure it speaks equally to both sides. That's kind of hard, but it's been a good process. Making hip hop music that also speaks broadly is also different. So I'm trying to infuse all the different styles, my blues, my jazz, my hip hop, my Negro spirituals, all of that into one hip hop album. So I'm enjoying the process, but it's quite a challenge.
Sure. One other creative piece that you've done is you just recently, you wrote a book, Church Forsaken, Practicing Presence in Neglected Neighborhoods. Can you talk to us a little bit about that too as well?
Be glad to. The premise of Church Forsaken comes from a quote by the Overseas Director of Missionary Fellowship. His quote was simply this: there are no God-forsaken places, just church-forsaken. And basically what he was saying was, while we might have in our mind there are certain places we would not live, or certain places that are places to drive through but never drive to, or certain people that we might marginalize and feel like, well, they're good, they're okay, but I don't know if I would want them in my household, right? No one is God-forsaken. God loves everyone, and God is in every place. But we have to be honest with ourselves and say that there's not equity around every place. God is in every place, but there are some places where people are hungry and some places where people have more than they need. God is in every place, and yet there's some places that are overrun with sickness and health and a lack of health care, and other places that have very little issues with health care and have an overbearing access to it. If God is in both places, why isn't there equity? Why isn't everyone taken care of? Well, if God is there and God loves everyone equally, then it can't be God that's the problem. It's God's people that are the problem. It's that God was never sitting back saying, I'm going to take care of it all, y'all just relax. It's the expectation that God's people would step into the place in which God has put them, wherever that may be all over the world, and be God's tangible representatives there, meaning that we will always love one another the way we love ourselves, that we will only want to do unto others as we would do to ourselves. And so while I'm a Christian pastor, so I titled it Church Forsaken, it could easily be called Faith Forsaken. Are people with faith, people who believe in God, actually being tangible representatives of the God they say they worship in the place they've been put in? Because if we were, the world would look different.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no
So I'm
problem.
going to go to some questions now. Kayshawn asked, what do you love more, art or music?
Oh, Good question, Shai. Well, I could cop out and say that music is art, but I'm not gonna cop out because I know what you mean by the question. The question is about visual arts and music. So I am probably would give a slight edge to music for myself. And the reason why I give a slight edge to music is because I feel like for me in my visual art pursuits, I have found that visual art can feel more internal to me, right? Like it's about what's going on inside of me and be expressing it on a canvas or expressing it through mosaic work and glass work and all the different ways I do visual art. But music for me has always felt communal. It's not something I do by myself. It's always something I do with other people and do with other people in mind. And so there's lots of visual art that I've done that's been just for me, where I just drew something and kept it in my sketchbook, but I don't want anybody to see it. But very few things I have done musically, I've kept to myself. They have been done with other people, done for with other people in mind. And therefore, I think I give a slight edge to music because of its communal attributes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
So Elena and Izan, and forgive me if I mispronounced your name, but I think they both have pretty much the same question. They both, Izan said, what has been your most impactful moment in your music career? And Elena said that what was your favorite performance experience and where did you perform it and why was it your favorite? So I think they're both kind of the same.
Yeah. So hands down, my favorite choral performance was actually in 2016. And that was when I had the opportunity to go back to South Africa. I went with a group of global leaders who were talking about global injustice and how the church would respond. So we met Bishop Desmond Tutu and all these different things. And so when I went to South Africa in 1996 to sing with the choir, we sang in Regina Mundi Church, which is the church where Bishop Tutu was the leader, but I never met him, right? So it was pretty impressive. Now, some of the group got to meet Nelson Mandela when we were there and went to his house and sang. So like, there's all of these amazing opportunities. But when I went back in 2016 and we met him, I got to tell him that I was a part of the group that came in 1996. And he remembered the choir like it was nothing. Oh, that brought waves through our country, a multicultural, multiracial choir coming of children to show us what it could look like for South Africa post-apartheid. And he said, you guys sang our national anthem. It was so beautiful. Could you sing it for me the way y'all sang it? And in that moment, standing in Regina Mundi Church in front of all the global leaders and Desmond Tutu, I sang the choral version of Nkosi Sikeleli that I learned from the Chicago Children's Choir with tears in my eyes. That was the most powerful moment of my life. And it was connected to CCC. It was connected to this 20-year pilgrimage, making it back to a place that had changed my life. And it was using African Black music that has been my center for me. And I was honored. And while it was not thousands of people out there or any of that was hands down the most impactful performance I've ever done.
Wow. It gives me chills just even listening to you talk about it. So I have a question from someone who's anonymous. They wanted to know, how did CCC build your confidence? Was it the practice? Was it the concerts? What was it that gave you, your confidence?
Yeah, absolutely. It was all of that. I'm not gonna lie, like, practice at CCC is so like rigid and firm, and there's an expectation of excellence, but there's also a family orientation to CCC, right? So it's like what the confidence was is that you are excellent, right? Like you are a part of the Chicago Children's Choir. Do you understand what that means? How many other people around the world are awed by that? And so that kind of confidence, it wasn't even about being the best singer. It wasn't even about being the most talented. There are tons of people who sang in the choir with me who are professional artists whose voices are insanely good, who I'm just glad to know them. But my confidence was in the fact that I was a part of something bigger than me. And when I stepped out as an ambassador of the Chicago Children's Choir. Now when I step out as an ambassador of Chicago, or an ambassador of the United States of America, or in my case, an ambassador of my faith, ambassador of my God. So knowing who you represent and the fact that you have been chosen to represent them is a reason to have confidence. And I say the same to you, be confident. You are a part of the greatest choral organization in the world. You should be confident.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Do you remember any specific moment in your career that has changed how you think about music today?
Specific moment. Okay. This one might work, and you might be able to connect to this one. So this one actually connects back to the choir. So a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to sing background with the choir alumni for a Chance the Rapper at Lollapalooza. And I had sung on lots of stages and sung all over the world and all the different things. But when Josephine asked me, I was not a huge Chance the Rapper fan. Like, I knew his name. I didn't really listen to his music like that. I'm more of a 90s boom bap hip hop guy. So I wasn't necessarily into all the dancing and the, yeah, all that. And, but when we went to rehearse with that young man, in my mind, I was like, oh, he's just a hip hop artist who sings and dances. And, his attention to detail, his professionalism, his ability to now he wasn't just a rapper. He was arranging choral productions in front of my eyes. The drummer, I want you in the pocket here, stopping on this. No, I want you coming in on the upbeat here. I want you on the keys. No, let's switch it here. Let's do this. Choir, I want you to decrescendo there. It was amazing. And I said to myself, right, like what it did was it made me stop judging books by its cover, right? So regardless of the genre, regardless of what you see the artist doing on stage, every artist is a composer, a true musician who is putting together an experience, right? Whether you would like the experience, understand the experience, or not. So it just changed the way I look, not only at him, now I'm a huge Chance the Rapper fan, right? Like I got every album, I know every song, right? But that was from an actual experience with the artist versus me making a prejudgment. So I say to you, don't ever prejudge any artist. Listen carefully to their music, listen carefully to the nuances, and you'll have a new appreciation for any style of music.
Well, can I tell you, as a fan, I was out in the crowd during that performance.
It was amazing.
It was top notch. I got two quick questions for you. On getting back to our current state and coupling it with music, how do you think the COVID-19 pandemic is impacting the global music community? And then lastly, if you could leave us with C members.
So the last question, can you say it again?
Final words or pieces of advice to our CCC members.
Oh, got you. Okay. I think that music is actually one of the things that's keeping us all sane during this time, to be honest. I know that because I'm an artist myself and I have a lot of artist friends, I do know that many artists are struggling financially right now. We know about the big artists, those who have, platinum plaques and big names, but there are far more local small artists who just make a modest salary, who just take care of their families, who are really struggling during this time. But the fact that they can make art, the fact that they can still share their music, the fact that no one can take that from them has kept many people sane. When you look at the number of artists and musicians and folks who are just doing concerts for free online and having all these experiences for us to partake in, it's because we know that music can heal. Music can heal. And that's what I say. I think my last advice to the choir members would be that word, is how important you are during this time. Like, you've heard me talk about the choices I made vocationally, the choices I've made as far as being an artist, the choice I've made to live in a neighborhood that some people say is a place to escape rather than a place to live. But if you can remember that the gift that you bring, the gift of music, the gift of being who God created you to be, can heal, then you will be reminded of how important you are. And that confidence you're asking me about will continue to bubble up in you. You have a gift to heal people in a time when healing is necessary. With all the pain we're dealing with all the frustration we're dealing with, I am so thankful that we still have the Chicago Children's Choir and that each and every one of you are in it. Keep singing, keep sharing, and keep showing people how much music matters. I'm appreciative of each of you. And I'm just a reminder that being a part of the choir can change your life forever.
Thank you so much, Pastor J. And I want to remind everyone, he has a book that's out, and his latest album, can I get an amen? It will be coming out soon?
Yeah, it'll be coming out by the end of this year. I'll make sure the link is here.
Okay, well, check it out. And I want to thank all of you for being a part of the Fireside Chat series. You were amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Be well.